This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One thing I want to do with this channel is not just focus on the Browns. Obviously, there's always going to be a heavy focus on the Browns, but I upload a lot. And I think some of those slots that I use to upload would be best served talking about things around the division that are going to indirectly or directly affect the Cleveland Browns. And the Baltimore Ravens played in the NFL's opening game on Thursday, and it was a spectacular game. And I've had a lot of different thoughts about the Baltimore Ravens this offseason, and this game seemed to confirm a lot of those thoughts. Now, again, we live in a world without nuance. I have been saying that the Baltimore Ravens have some problems, and some people have interpreted that as the Baltimore Ravens are a disaster in Quincy's eyes, and that I think they're going to be awful. It's never what I said. I said that they're going to have issues with that offensive line. They're bringing over 3 new starters. And when you watch this game, it looked like they were having issues with the offensive line. I thought there was going to be some issues incorporating Derrick Henry, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And, Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson, which is on one hand a spectacular quarterback, but also a quarterback who has some definitive issues with the position that tend to hold him back from achieving all that he is capable of. And also a wide receiver core that's not that great. Can't separate unless Lamar Jackson breaks the pocket and makes it a scramble drill situation. But let's talk about one thing at a time. Let's talk about Baltimore's defense. Still very good. I think the way that Baltimore can make up for losing Patrick Queen and losing some guys in their safety room is by brute force in that DB room. They have Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, and Nate Wiggins. I think that's a tremendous cornerback trio. I think Nate Wiggins is going to be a really good player in this league. I know he's small, but I've seen small work at corner, and I think corner is one of those positions where you can be small, right? Is Smitty can play wide receiver at his size, and I think Nate Wiggins has no problem playing DB at his size. I mean, we've seen small, stout guys like Denzel Ward be able to make it through, albeit Denzel made it through with a concussion history, but that's not necessarily 100% related to Denzel Ward's size, right? It's possible that Nate Wiggins just doesn't have the same issues with concussions that Denzel Ward has, and he doesn't miss the amount of games that Denzel Ward missed, especially early in his career. I think Nate Wiggins is going to be a good young player. Marlon Humphreys is not what he used to be. I think that part is obvious, but he's still going to be decent, I would guess. And then Brandon Stevens, I think, is a solid corner. So that defense is pretty solid. The defensive interior is pretty good. Because that interior is so good, it allows them to get away with some lighter pieces at edge. And I like Trenton Simpson, their replacement for Pat Queen. I like what he can do there. I think the Ravens are still going to have a pretty solid defense. Is it better than what they had last year? We'll see, right? Losing TJ McDonald was a big deal, a huge deal. And Kansas City is certainly a test for that defense. And I think they didn't do amazing against Kansas City in this game, but I think they got the stops they needed to get against Kansas City. Outside of that one touchdown they gave up on that whole shot that they completely busted, where Marlon Humphreys just completely bailed on his deep third of the field, thinking that he had a safety behind him. Outside of that play, where they really did need a stop because that game was brought within 3. You get that stop there. You really flip the momentum of the game, especially after the wildest Isaiah Likely touchdown I've ever seen. It was actually an unlikely Isaiah Likely touchdown. We got to talk about Isaiah Likely too once we flip this over. But yeah, I think the Ravens defense is going to be close to as good as it was last year. They're going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. I think there's no doubt about that. But that offense, though. That offense is where I had the questions, right? My jokes about Roquan Smith aside, the offense is where I had those questions with the Ravens. And the offense seemed to validate all those questions I had about them in the offseason. 3 new offensive linemen. They replaced right tackle, right guard, not center, but I believe left guard. That's going to be an issue, right? You can survive with one guy out there that ain't supposed to be out there in the offensive line, but 3, it's a little tough. Now, I don't think they're going to look as bad as they did at points in this game versus Kansas City the whole year. They'll figure something out. And, I think eventually they're going to put Roger Rosengarten in there. I think once Roger Rosengarten is ready to play right tackle, it's going to kick a lot of things into place for Baltimore. It's not a great year to play Baltimore super late because I do think they're going to figure this out by like week 8. But that offensive line, a little bit of an issue as it stands right now. I think they're going to be easy to penetrate. I think they're going to be easy to get through on. And I think 2 things led to Lamar Jackson running as much as he did in this game. One reason why Lamar Jackson was running as much as he did in this game, because that was the only way they were able to move the ball consistently throughout the entire game. Another reason Lamar Jackson was running this ball so much was the offensive line. We kind of touched on that. Another reason Lamar Jackson had to run so much is because his wide receivers could not get separation in structure. Now, there were some times out of structure where the wide receivers were able to get a separation. If you look at the big plays that Baltimore had in this game, 80% of them, it feels like, were out of structure plays, were plays that happened because Lamar Jackson's scrambling around back there and he throws the ball up and it gets caught by somebody and then that guy goes off to make a big play, or Lamar Jackson scrambles right, throws on the run or something like that. It was usually out of structure. Lamar had to live out of structure in this game. And I think the reason that isn't just because the offensive line isn't great. Honestly, I don't think the offensive line caused a lot of the problems that we saw in the fourth quarter with Lamar in scoring in the end of the game. I think it was a lot of Lamar having to rely on being out of structure to get separation from his receivers, especially, right? Tight ends wise, you're going to get separation with Mark Andrews. Sometimes you're definitely going to get it with Isaiah Likely, who flat out balled in this game. And I think Isaiah Likely is going to be a huge guy that they're going to target. They're going to use that double tight end set a lot, especially if they're going to run Derrick Henry like they're running him. They're going to use those sets, and I think that's going to be probably the most effective one because the less wide receivers they have on the field, the better. And I think they just can't separate in structure, which leads to Lamar scrambling around, running around, taking a lot of hits. And while that made for a very entertaining game versus the Kansas City Chiefs, that cannot be the long-term strategy for winning for the Baltimore Ravens. Because it's just going to put too much stress on Deshaun Watson. We talked about it in a video where I labeled, hey, the Browns, Deshaun Watson has to be boring. This is exactly what I want to prevent Deshaun Watson from having to do, right? All the running around, all the individual playmaking. Like, this is what a quarterback looks like when he has to literally do it all, is what Lamar Jackson looked like today. And the reason you don't want your quarterback to be pushed to that level is eventually it breaks down, whether it be physically or mentally. And it looks like when I watch the Ravens play on offense, it's all on Lamar Jackson. Now, some guys step up, again, when it's scramble drill time and they make plays with Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But that only happens because Lamar Jackson is out the pocket trying to create. Like, it feels like it's all on Lamar Jackson here. And I think he's going to get a horrible rap from some of the morning shows because he missed a couple of throws at the end of this game. The amount of throws they're relying on Lamar Jackson to make in this game is just ridiculous. They really should have some counters. It shouldn't be this difficult for Lamar Jackson to get an open wide receiver. It's almost like when he does get an open wide receiver in structure, it catches him off guard. It's going to be a story the whole season. I wonder how people are going to go with it. But I don't know if the issue is that Lamar Jackson isn't good enough. I just think that they run Lamar Jackson on 100% power all the time. Like, if you're a computer person, which I am, think about it like this. The Ravens are a team that has to overclock their quarterback to play a game from 2 years ago because the rest of the system just can't keep up. Like, in order to play the newest game, they got to overclock that CPU 150%. And that's going to work in the short term. That game's going to boot and it might get a decent frame rate, but eventually the bill's going to come due on that. Also, again, I talked about this with Deshaun. You want him to be boring. This is why. Because when you don't have to make all those crazy plays to score the football, you end up scoring the football more often. We talk about Lamar's issues in the postseason. I feel like Lamar's issues in the postseason are more about how much Baltimore just kind of relies on him to be the entire offense more than his ability to play in the postseason. He can't, like, Pat Mahomes can have a bad day and still get by with the Chiefs and Andy Reid. Josh Allen can have a bad game and still get by. Like, these quarterbacks that we laud for being great playoff playmakers, they have it. Joe Burrow has had bad games in the playoffs, but has gotten by because other things carried him. Lamar Jackson does not have that option, so when he plays a bad game, they lose. And then it gets put all on him again. And then you can see it physically with Lamar Jackson, where, like, I have been a fan of Lamar Jackson outside of, like, obviously I don't love him when he plays against the Browns, but I like watching Lamar Jackson play football. I find him to be a very good quarterback. And more than ever this year, it feels like this guy is pressing. Like, he really does hear how people are talking about him. He does care about how people are talking about him. And I wonder how much good is that actually doing him anymore? Like, maybe it gave him some motivation early in his career, the whole bet good for a running back stuff and making fun of those jokes. And I think that did, like, do a good thing for motivating him and helping him get better. But now it feels like it's always present in his head. Like, he seems stressed for a guy who's playing a week 1 game. And I wonder if that continues throughout the season and what that turns into. But it's just a lot. Too much offensively is on Lamar Jackson. Now let's talk about the guy that's supposed to be taking some of that weight off, Derrick Henry. I've gotten a lot of flack, especially from Baltimore fans, about my opinions of Derrick Henry's fit in this Baltimore offense. I think a lot of people looked at it lazily. Or not lazily, but looked at it simply. They saw Ravens run game good. Derrick Henry, good. Ravens plus Derrick Henry run game going to be great. And that's a logical conclusion to come from like a 10,000 foot view. But I thought there were some things, some smaller details about that transition that were going to make it a little bit awkward. How Derrick Henry likes to run the ball versus how the Ravens like to run the ball. The Ravens ran the ball a lot out of pistol sets. Right? That's where they like to run a lot of their read options out of. Now, they always did some shotgun. They always did some under center, but it was usually a lot of pistol sets that they would run out of. This game, I don't remember seeing very many pistol sets. When they ran with Derrick Henry, they were running pretty traditional wide zone concepts, pin pull stuff. They looked like the Cleveland Browns trying to run the football. And ironically enough, the Browns might look more like the Ravens this year running the football because they're switching it up. But they were doing a lot of the stuff that the Browns do, the West Coast offense, the Stefanski era stuff that, we saw works with a guy like Nick Chubb or a guy like Derrick Henry. And this kind of goes to my whole point about how people kind of oversimplify how easy it is to translate success from one offense to another. Because, yeah, you can run the same exact concepts that Derrick Henry ran in Tennessee. The plays are public information. You can run the same exact plays. But knowing what it takes personnel-wise and scouting-wise to have the personnel to run those plays, well, that's a completely different thing. The Ravens are used to drafting guys who are good at running, the G-Row system on the run game, right? They have guys who are there for that specific purpose. That's who they scouted for. That's what they know how to scout for. Now they're trying to merge a wide zone system into the G-Row system. And they're doing all of this without any original architects of a West Coast offense or the G-Row offense, right? It's Todd Monken, who's a spread guy, trying to do this. He's not Greg Roman, who knows his system very well, and he's not a West Coast guy. He's not somebody who comes from that West Coast lineage that really knows how to put together a wide zone run scheme. So yes, while that recipe for a run game that the Ravens have is tremendous, and while that recipe that the Titans had for Derrick Henry is tremendous, what the Ravens are trying to put together for Derrick Henry right now, it's not original recipe. It's an imitation of an imitation of an imitation. It's going to be interesting to see if they can fix this. There's also a question of like, how long is Derrick Henry going to be good? He was decent last year, but I think his numbers, on a efficiency basis weren't that impressive. I know people say he was second in rushing yards, but I mean, it wasn't that many rushing yards that he got second in the league with. And he was second with like one of the worst in the top 10 of all rushing yards per carry. Like the efficiency wasn't there for Derrick Henry last year. So I don't know how that's going to work out. Now it's early. They can figure this out. They can cook up a different recipe and they figure it out, and Derrick Henry ends up being one of the best running backs in the NFL. That's certainly possible. But I mean, that's not even touching, right? The stuff that we talked about with Derrick Henry in this game, we're not even touching the other issue, which is the offensive line. And it wasn't terrible from run blocking in this game, but it's not like a great offensive line. So a lot of questions there. Now, all in all, Baltimore's going to be a really good team because they have Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about Lamar a little bit more, because I talked about a lot of things I don't love about what Lamar's doing and how he's pressing a little bit and how the Ravens are just using him. Like the usage rate for Lamar Jackson is just ridiculous at this point. Lamar is Lamar, which means we know what he's great at and we know what he's not. And that's not changing anytime soon. Lamar can run. Lamar can play out of structure. Lamar can, hit you with some intermediate throws. He could hit you with some short throws. He's very accurate, very quick on the gun with that kind of stuff. He's a better passer, intermediate to short, than people give him credit for. But where Lamar struggles, it's over the middle of the field in deep balls. Sometimes he struggles with some of the more complex throws, right? Trying to hit a back pylon. We saw all of those things exhibited in this game. He missed the back pylon throw on a corner route to Isaiah Likely. Now, that was a tough ass throw they were asking him to make. Like I think some people were calling that a layup. I don't know. The second throw was absolutely a layup. Zay Flowers was wide open in the middle of the end zone. He had a clear passing lane. It was a layup. He overthought the throw. He messed it up. There were some other throws where other decisions where he threw deep balls. I just don't understand. Like sometimes with Lamar Jackson, it's not the accuracy of the deep balls that concerns me. It's the decision when he throws a deep ball to throw that deep ball that would concern me if I were a Raven fan. But oh no, I mean, like that's the only stuff you deal with. At the end of the day, he's a 2-time MVP. He's one of the best players in football, and you're going to win 10, 11 games with him. And that's what the Ravens look like. They look like a slightly worse version of the team they were last year. Going to be a good defense. Going to be an offense that's going to really rely on Lamar Jackson. I think this year a little bit more than last year. Got good special teams. I think their year to win it all was last year. And I didn't see anything in this game to move me off of that. We'll see what the rest of the season does. But let me know your thoughts in that game down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.